What if the really boring, mundane chores of your daily life, like sweeping the floor or carrying the groceries, or even just asking your kid about their day, what if those aren't things you just have to get out of the way?
Right, like you're rushing through them so you can get to the quote unquote real work.
Exactly. What if they actually are the real work?
I love that. And that's exactly the architectural blueprint we are completely flipping upside down today.
Yeah.
Because usually, when we think about building a life, we treat the basics as just the concrete slab.
Yeah, you pour it and then you try to forget about it.
Right. You forget it's there. And you just start dreaming about, I don't know, the cathedral ceilings and the wraparound porches of your big, shiny achievements.
We treat life's absolute fundamentals as like a prerequisite chore, a hurdle. But welcome to today's deep dive because we are looking at a stack of sources that argue the exact opposite.
And it's a really eclectic mix of texts we're pulling from today, too.
Oh, totally. We've got modern strength coaching notes, some ancient philosophy from Seneca and Lao Tzu, macroeconomic theory from Peter Drucker, of all things, and even some pretty uncomfortable reflections on parenting.
It is a broad spectrum, for sure. But the thing that ties them all together is how they converge on one central mission.
Right.
Our goal for this deep dive, the question we're answering for you listening right now, is how do we actually measure the weight and the quality of a well-lived life?
And the conclusion they all collectively arrive at is just fascinating. They argue that depth, presence, and our orientation toward other people matter far more than the sheer length of our lives or the defensive walls we spend so much time building around ourselves.
Yeah, the walls are a huge theme here. But let's actually start at the absolute physical baseline to understand how this works.
Okay, let's do it.
We have these notes from a veteran strength coach named Dan John, and he has spent his entire adult life studying human performance. But his core instructions for a good life are, well, they're embarrassingly simple.
Like almost too simple, right?
Exactly. He just says sleep soundly, eat protein and vegetables, drink water, pick things up from off the ground, put them up overhead, and carry them for time and distance.
And that's it.
That's the whole list.
Wow. I mean, the profound part of Dan John's list is honestly what he left out.
Right.
He hasn't distilled human performance down to those basics because he,
Yeah.
ran out of complex ideas. He distilled it because he ran out of everything that wasn't strictly essential.
Yes. It's this quiet argument that the simple fundamentals are the actual load-bearing structures of your life.
Yeah, but I feel like human nature totally rebels against that kind of simplicity. We hate it.
Oh, we despise it.
We are constantly wired to want the secret hack or the expensive supplement or just, more time to figure it all out. We think if we just had more time, we wouldn't have to focus on the boring basics.
And that innate desire for more is just perfectly exposed in this amazing parable from Anthony DeMello.
Oh, I love this one.
It's so good. He tells a story where God sends an angel to a spiritual master with an incredible offer. The angel says, you can have 1,000,000 years of life or more. How long do you wish to live?
And the master doesn't even hesitate. He just says 80 years.
Right. And his disciples are completely horrified.
I mean, you would be. They're probably thinking of all the generations of people that could benefit from 1,000,000 years of his teaching and his wisdom.
But the master's logic for turning down the gift is just devastating. He explains that if he lived for 1,000,000 years, people would become completely obsessed with lengthening their own lives rather than cultivating any actual wisdom.
Wow.
And if you think about the mechanism behind that, it makes complete sense. It echoes Aesop's moral, right? That we would often be terribly sorry if our wishes were gratified.
Because if you had 1,000,000 years to live, every single moment loses its scarcity.
Exactly. And scarcity is what forces presence. If you have 1,000,000 years, you would spend the first, 10,000 years just procrastinating.
Or living in absolute terror of getting a paper cut. Like
Ah.
the gift of infinite extension would just swallow the depth of the life itself.
It totally would.
It's fascinating because we actually see this exact same dynamic play out in macroeconomics, of all places.
Right, the Peter Drucker source.
Yeah, this desire to protect ourselves by just adding more padding, more time, more walls.
Yes. Drucker's analysis of Mexico's economic history perfectly mirrors that master's parable. For 50 years, Mexico built these massive protectionist economic walls.
50 years.
Half a century. They put up these trade barriers designed to entirely shield their domestic economy from the harsh realities of the outside world.
And the strategy completely backfired.
Completely.
Because by trying to protect their domestic industries, they removed all the friction required for growth. They actually became incredibly dependent on the exact foreign imports they were trying to avoid.
Which is the ultimate irony. So when those walls eventually had to come down, their internal industries were just far too weak to survive on their own.
The wall preserved the appearance of strength while completely hollowing out the reality of it.
It was a slow-motion surrender. I mean, protectionism always creates a frail interior.
You know, for you listening, think about how we do this on a personal level all the time. We treat our own lifespans exactly like Mexico's economy.
That was a great analogy.
We try to wall our way to greatness. We think if we can just build enough defensive padding like more money, more status, a longer timeline, we'll finally feel secure enough to start living.
But Drucker and DeMello are both saying you can't wall your way to greatness. You can only grow your way there.
Which forces a very practical question. If adding more time to our lives or building these defensive walls are the wrong approaches, how do we actively dismantle those walls on a daily basis?
Well, the sources suggest we start by changing the literal metrics we use to measure our days.
Okay.
The most tangible way to do that is by changing the questions we ask. The author Ryan Holiday has this really piercing meditation on parenting that gets right to the heart of this.
Oh, this part was super convicting.
Yeah, he points out that every single day, parents ask their kids some version of, how was school? Did you behave? What grade did you get on the maths test?
Which are totally normal questions.
Right. His critique isn't that these are inherently evil questions, but rather that they are a clear transmission of values. Think about what a question like, did you behave, feels like to a child. It feels like an audit.
Yeah, it does.
You are asking them to measure their worth against an external authority's convenience. It sends the message that compliance is what we notice and performance is what we track.
So Holiday draws on this epigraph from the Stoic philosopher Seneca. Seneca wrote that wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness.
A beautiful thought.
Right. So using that as the foundation, Holiday proposes we fundamentally change the daily question. Instead of asking about math grades or compliance, you ask your child, what good turn did you do today? Who did you help?
And that shift completely reorganizes a child's worldview. Because suddenly you aren't auditing them. You are empowering them.
You're teaching the child to run their entire day through a filter of empathy.
Exactly. They begin to move through the school hallways, actively scanning their environment for opportunities to be useful, because they know that is the metric that matters at the dinner table.
I have to stop and push back on this for a second, though.
Okay, go for it.
If I start interrogating my kid every single day at 3 p.m. with, what good did you do today? Aren't we still just tracking a metric? Like I'm just swapping out a math grade for a kindness grade.
That's their point.
The kid is still ultimately performing for me, right? Trying to come up with a heartwarming story on the bus ride home just to keep me off their back.
That is a very valid critique, but there is a crucial distinction in the long-term mechanism here. You are absolutely right that at first the child is just performing to answer the parent's prompt.
Right.
But the goal of the kindness question isn't to create a spreadsheet of good deeds. It's about installing a cognitive framework. When a child is consistently asked to look for ways to help others, their brain physically wires itself to notice the vulnerable.
Oh, interesting.
Over time, the external prompt fades, and the child internalizes the standard. This is exactly what Leo Tolstoy was writing about when he said, a wise man sets requirements for himself. An unwise man makes requirements for others.
Okay, I get it now. So the daily question from the parent is just the scaffolding.
Yes, exactly.
But eventually the scaffolding comes down, the child starts setting that requirement for themselves, and what's left standing is actual character.
They transition from external compliance to true internal character. But, and this is key, the sources are very careful to remind us that this shift in character isn't just an intellectual exercise that happens in your head.
Right, you can't just think your way into it.
No, for these values to actually take root, they have to be physically embodied.
Which brings us right back to the physicality of Dan John's instruction to pick things up and carry them for time and distance.
Full circle.
Carrying a heavy sandbag or a kettlebell isn't just a physical warm-up you do before you sit down in an armchair to read philosophy. It is a cognitive requirement for wisdom.
John F. Kennedy articulated this beautifully. He said that mental and physical vigor go hand in hand.
Yeah.
There aren't two separate tracks. They are the exact same track. And Erwan Le Corre, who studies the deep connection between movement and cognition, explains exactly how this mechanism works. He notes that improving your physical movement requires intense mindfulness. When your movement improves, you improve.
Let's actually unpack how that works in practice. Because if I'm trying to balance a heavy kettlebell over my head while walking 50 yards, my nervous system is firing on all cylinders.
Oh, absolutely.
I literally do not have the cognitive bandwidth to worry about a stressful email from my boss or some embarrassing thing I said 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The physical load forces my brain into the absolute present millisecond.
And that is the exact neurological demand LaCour is talking about. The physical effort trains your brain's capacity for presence.
Wow.
And this aligns perfectly with the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. He argues that truth must be acquired through effort.
Through effort, okay.
Schopenhauer says that if you just read a profound quote in a book, you are receiving truth on loan. It's flimsy, but the truth you acquire by your own thinking, through the literal fatigue of your intellect and your body, that truth becomes a physical member of your own body.
We get this so wrong in modern culture.
How do you mean?
Well, we often treat the body like it's just a meat vehicle for the brain. Like its only job is to smoothly transport the head from the bedroom to the office chair to the next library.
Right.
But Schopenhauer and LaCour are arguing that wisdom literally has to be sweat out. The physical fatigue is the philosophical truth.
And to sustain that kind of grueling, sweaty effort over a lifetime, we have to adopt what the chess and martial arts prodigy Josh Waitzkin calls a genuine love for training.
A love for it.
You have to cultivate a deep affection for the raw, unglamorous process of getting better. Because if you view the physical and mental effort as just a grim obligation, human nature will kick in, and you will constantly invent busy work, just to avoid doing the actual heavy lifting.
I do this all the time.
Oh, me too.
If I know I have a massive, intimidating project to tackle, suddenly reorganizing my entire desk feels like the most urgent task in the world. I invent a chore to avoid the weight.
We all do. Which actually brings us to the most difficult threshold of this entire deep dive.
Okay.
Let's say we are doing the heavy lifting. We are asking the better questions. But then Thursday afternoon rolls around, the pressure mounts, and we inevitably stumble. We fail, or we face genuine pain.
And the immediate human instinct is to panic and start building walls again. Only this time, they are inner walls.
Precisely.
You build walls of anger or frustration or self-rejection, which instantly shatters that deep presence we just worked so hard to cultivate.
And the thinkers in our sources converge on a very stark truth about this internal friction. Ralph Waldo Emerson gives us a blunt, inescapable warning. He says, "Nothing will bring you peace except yourself."
Man, that quote closes every single exit door, doesn't it?
It really does.
You can't blame your boss, your spouse, the economy, or the traffic. If peace is going to happen, it is entirely an inside job.
It is entirely on you. And there is an anonymous quote in the text that builds on Emerson by giving us the actual directional coordinates for this. It says we must get away from dis-ease by cultivating ease.
Disease as in a lack of ease.
Right. And notice the specific mechanics there. It doesn't say run away from your problems. It says to actively cultivate the opposite state. When you define your goals in terms of escaping something, your focus is still completely locked onto the thing you're fleeing.
You're constantly looking over your shoulder.
Exactly. But cultivating ease means changing your orientation entirely. You move toward presence.
This sets up Miguel Angel Ruiz so well, because he takes this idea of inner friction to its deepest psychological level. He argues that self-rejection is actually a form of protectionism.
Which connects right back to Peter Drucker's economic walls.
Exactly. Think about the mechanics of self-rejection. When I fail at something, or when I look at a part of myself that is inadequate, it feels incredibly vulnerable. So I get angry at myself. I reject that part of me. I wall it off. Just like Mexico walled off its economy, I'm using anger as a shield so I don't have to feel the vulnerability.
Wow.
But Ruiz says that when we do this, we become internally fractured and weak. Forgiving yourself is the act of dropping the shield. Tearing down that inner wall is what makes you a free, integrated human being.
And this internal integration leads us directly to Lao Tzu, who offers an image that completes this entire thought process. In the Tao Te Ching, he writes, "The best fighter is never angry."
Now wait, I have to jump in here because I genuinely struggle with this concept.
What part?
Well, if you are in a literal physical fight, or if you're just trying to overcome a massive, unfair obstacle at work, isn't adrenaline fueled by a little bit of rage?
It seems like it would be.
Yeah, don't you need to get fired up to lift the heavy weights Dan John was talking about? It seems like anger is a highly effective fuel.
It is a very common assumption because anger feels powerful in the moment. But Lao Tzu is pointing to the underlying mechanics of emotion. In combat, or in any great struggle, anger is actually a symptom of desperation. It is a blaring alarm system telling you that an external obstacle has successfully hijacked your internal nervous system.
Oh, wow.
If you are angry, you are fundamentally at war with yourself. The fighter who has achieved true mastery isn't some unfeeling robot. He simply doesn't need to prove anything to the obstacle. Adrenaline fueled by rage burns out quickly and leads to mistakes, but stillness allows for sustained, calculated endurance.
So the stillness isn't an absence of strength.
No, it is the absolute fullest expression of it.
Because he hasn't handed the remote control of his emotions over to his opponent. That makes so much sense. But practically speaking, how do we actually maintain that kind of stillness?
It's hard.
Daily life is full of tiny, irritating friction. How do we keep from building those defensive walls back up every Tuesday afternoon when the internet goes out or a client yells at us?
We maintain it by mastering what the text refers to as the shadow curriculum.
The shadow curriculum.
Yeah, these aren't the grand, sweeping life choices. The shadow curriculum is made up of the small, grueling, everyday tests of endurance. And the sources give us several protocols for passing these tests. The first is a protocol for our attention. It states, after every complaint, immediately name one thing you were thankful for.
I have to be honest, reading that in the source material, it sounds exhausting.
It does.
And a little bit like toxic positivity. Am I really supposed to force a silver lining every single time I sit in traffic or stub my toe?
It sounds like toxic positivity until you look at the neurological mechanism behind it. The goal isn't to pretend the stubbed toe doesn't hurt, or that the traffic isn't infuriating.
Okay, then what is it?
It is an attention training protocol. The human brain habituates to whatever lens you consistently look through. If you only voice complaints, your brain wires itself to ensure that difficulty becomes your only reality.
Because that's what you're practicing.
Right. Forcing yourself to immediately name something you are grateful for prevents that habituation. It forces the brain to simultaneously hold two conflicting truths. It doesn't eliminate the difficulty. It simply refuses to let the difficulty be the only story you tell yourself.
It's keeping the aperture of your perspective forced open. I like that. Another major part of this shadow curriculum is the warning against minimum wage thinking.
Yes.
And the sources clarified this has nothing to do with your actual salary or the economy. It's about the internal standard you hold yourself to when nobody else is watching. It's the habit of doing just enough to not get fired, or just enough to fly under the radar.
Because minimum wage thinking is the ultimate form of interior protectionism.
Yeah.
You are shielding yourself from the risk of caring too much.
Right. It's like doing the bare minimum repetitions with terrible form during one of Dan John's workouts.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
To the casual outside observer, it looks like you're sweating. It looks like you're putting in the work. But your nervous system knows the truth. You aren't building muscle. You're just building walls around your own mediocrity.
And the danger of those terrible reps is that they trick your brain into thinking you've done the work. Which is why the text introduces the anonymous rule to trust, but verify specifically regarding our own internal monologue.
Oh, that's tough.
We have to verify our own excuses. When we feel overwhelmed and suddenly decide to reorganize our inbox, are we actually being productive, or are we just avoiding the important heavy lift?
We have to be brutally honest with ourselves. And maintaining that honesty takes incredible endurance. Which brings us to Ralph Waldo Emerson's definition of a hero.
I love this definition.
Emerson didn't think heroes were born with special powers. He said that a hero is no braver than an ordinary man, but he is brave for 5 minutes longer.
5 minutes. That is the entire gap between what most people do and what the situation actually required. Heroism is almost never about raw capability or talent. It's about endurance.
Yeah.
It's about staying present and keeping your inner walls down when every instinct in your body is screaming at you to run away or get angry.
So when we step back and look at this entire journey today, I mean, we're talking about carrying heavy weights, forgiving our deepest flaws, asking our kids about kindness, and enduring the uncomfortable moments for 5 minutes longer. It almost feels like we are trying to construct this impenetrable fortress of a perfect human being.
It can definitely feel that way. But the ultimate synthesis of all these sources tells us we're doing the exact opposite.
The opposite.
Yeah. David L. Gaffer, who's quoted in Tolstoy's Calendar of Wisdom, makes this incredibly radical claim. He says, a soul does not learn. It simply remembers what it knew all along.
It simply remembers.
Yes. The profound unifying truth of this deep dive is that all of this grueling work, The physical lifting, the setting of our own internal requirements, the refusal to build defensive walls. None of this is about constructing a new, perfect person from scratch.
You aren't building anything.
No, you are simply clearing away the rubble. You are actively dismantling the walls of protectionism, the minimum wage thinking, and the self-rejection that have accumulated over a self that was actually whole and capable to begin with.
That is such a freeing perspective. You already have the capacity. You just have to uncover it by doing the daily work.
Absolutely.
So for you listening, let's remind ourselves of the core directives we've pulled from these sources today. Sleep soundly, eat real food, drink water, carry something heavy to force your brain into the present.
Ask your kids, or really anyone you love, what good turn they did today.
Stop running from disease and forgive yourself so you can drop the shield.
And, as the writer Denise Chavez reminds us in the final text, make sure to sit down at a big round table and share a meal with other human beings. She uses sharing tacos as a literal metaphor for world peace, which is just brilliant.
Tacos for world peace, I am in.
Right. You start there, with the shared humanity of a meal. The rest of the profound philosophical stuff has a way of naturally following.
You start with the foundation. But remember, the foundation isn't the boring chore you rush through before you build the house. The foundation is the house. The way you eat, sleep, move, and treat the people around you, that is the actual architecture of your life.
Well said.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on today. If Lao Tzu is right, and the absolute best fighter is never angry, and if Josh Waitzkin is right, that we must cultivate a deep love for the grueling process of training, I want you to think about your absolute biggest current frustration right now.
Whatever it is.
Whatever struggle or obstacle is weighing heavily on your mind today, what would happen if, starting tomorrow morning, you stopped trying to angrily defeat it? What if, instead, you completely dropped your shield and treated that frustration as a heavy weight that you've been given the absolute privilege to carry, just to see how remarkably strong your presence can become?
That's a challenge right there.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.